When a well-dressed man walked into a prestigious bank to cash a check, he expected professionalism, but instead he faced humiliation. What the bank manager didn't realize? That man wasn't just any customer. He owned the bank. What happened next left the entire room in stunned silence. The bell above the door chimed softly as Darius stepped into the lavish interior of Crownstone Bank in downtown Nashville. The air smelled faintly of leather and polished wood, with the quiet murmurs of business transactions echoing off the high marble ceilings. Darius, dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit, carried himself with quiet confidence as he approached the teller line. He held a check in his hand, a large one, and his expression was calm, almost unreadable. The line moved slowly, but Darius didn't seem to mind. He looked around the room with measured patience, observing the chandeliers casting warm light over customers seated in plush chairs. The bank was the kind of place where prestige was practically dripping off the walls, a place that seemed to assume its patrons had earned the right to be there. When it was finally his turn, Darius stepped forward and handed the check to the young teller behind the counter. She glanced at it, her eyebrows lifting slightly at the amount, before her face shifted into something more neutral. "I'll need to call my manager to approve this, sir," she said, her tone polite but hesitant. Darius nodded, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Of course. Take your time." A man appeared moments later, mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, wearing an expensive suit that seemed designed to command authority. Mr. Simmons, the bank manager, approached the counter briskly, his eyes immediately darting to the check. He took it from the teller, his gaze flickering to Darius with the briefest hesitation. There was a pause, a subtle narrowing of Simmons's eyes. "Excuse me, sir," Simmons began, his voice low but firm. "Do you have any ID to go with this check?" Darius calmly reached into his pocket, pulling out his driver's license and sliding it across the counter. Simmons barely glanced at it before handing it back, his expression tight. "I see. Well, I'll need to verify this with the issuing party," Simmons said, holding the check as though it were a suspicious artifact. Something in the air shifted, not noticeable to most, but Darius caught it. A look of skepticism crossed Simmons's face, subtle but unmistakable. It wasn't the kind of doubt born from procedure, it was personal. "Is there an issue?" Darius asked, his tone measured but firm. Simmons didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the check, the corners of his mouth tugging downward. "Just give me a moment," he muttered before walking away toward his office. The tension in the room thickened as Darius waited, his posture straight, his expression composed. This was only the beginning. Minutes passed, and Darius remained at the counter, his calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the buzzing activity around him. A faint murmur of whispers started from a few customers nearby, their curious glances darting toward him. Mr. Simmons reappeared, holding the check in one hand, his expression stern and unreadable. "I've looked into this, Mr. Darius, is it?" Simmons began, deliberately leaving off Darius's last name, as though it didn't matter. "This check raises some red flags. Can you tell me where you got it?" Darius tilted his head slightly, his dark eyes studying Simmons. "It was issued to me as payment for a business transaction. Everything is in order, I assure you." Simmons's lips pressed into a thin line. "A business transaction, you say?" He leaned in slightly, his voice lowering but losing none of its edge. "And what business are you in?" For a moment, the room seemed to shrink around them. Darius's gaze didn't waver. "I'm in real estate development," he replied evenly. Simmons let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "Real estate, huh? Must be quite a deal to warrant a check like this." He waved the paper slightly, drawing attention to it. His tone sharpened. "Look, these things don't just fall out of the sky. I'm going to have to decline this transaction." The words hung in the air like a slap. "You haven't verified anything yet?" Darius said, his voice steady but edged with frustration. "The issuing party's contact information is right there. Call them." Simmons waved him off dismissively. "I don't need to waste my time chasing down details for something that's obviously suspicious. If you want, you can try cashing this somewhere else." The volume of his voice rose slightly, enough to catch the attention of more customers and staff. A woman seated near the entrance glanced up, her eyes flitting between Simmons and Darius. One of the tellers whispered something to her co-worker, their gazes darting nervously toward the manager. Darius took a step closer to the counter, his calm now threaded with a quiet intensity. "So, you're refusing to validate this check because—" "Why, exactly?" Simmons shrugged, his tone condescending. "Look, these procedures are in place for a reason. It's not personal." But the way his eyes lingered on Darius told a different story. Darius held his ground. "If it's not personal, then why not follow standard protocol and verify it? Or are you suggesting I don't belong here?" The question seemed to throw Simmons off for a brief moment, but he quickly recovered, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Sir, this bank reserves the right to refuse service if something seems off, and frankly, this doesn't look right to me." The murmurs in the room grew louder, the tension palpable. Darius glanced around briefly, catching the uncomfortable looks on the faces of the other patrons. Yet none of them spoke up. "Interesting," Darius said quietly, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. He straightened his jacket, his movements deliberate. "So, you're declining to provide service based on your feelings rather than facts?" Simmons's smirk faded, replaced by a flash of irritation. "Sir, I don't have to explain myself further. You can take this matter up with another branch if you like." Darius stood there for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he slowly reached for the check still in Simmons's hand. "If that's your final decision, I'll handle this another way," he said evenly, his tone carrying a weight that made Simmons falter slightly. As Darius turned away, pulling out his phone, Simmons muttered just loud enough for him to hear, "Some people really don't know when to quit." The quiet resolve in Darius's face betrayed nothing, but the look in his eyes promised that this wasn't over. Darius stepped aside to a quieter corner of the bank, his phone held loosely in his hand. He took a deep breath, calming himself, though his jaw tightened ever so slightly. He began dialing a number, his voice low and measured as he spoke. Those close enough to overhear caught fragments of the conversation. "Yes, at the branch now, refusing to process. I understand." Meanwhile, Simmons watched him from the counter,